Hey, Connor, how's it going today?
Oh, I'm tired. It was a long
You're
weekend.
tired. A long weekend. What did you do? Did you party all weekend?
We hosted game night. We had our friends over to play Mario Kart. No one could beat me. So,
That is the
it's
most
just.
zennial thing you could have said. It was crazy. We hosted this ridiculous Mario Kart party, which actually sounds like a ton of fun, by the way.
It was a lot of fun. I set up the whole tournament and everything. We had 8 players. It was great. We had, brackets put
Oh
up on
my
our
goodness.
wall next to our TV. It was great.
I'm coming over to your house. All right, let's get this started.
Let's go for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Immersive Medical Podcast. Today we are interviewing a very special guest, Bonnie Clipper. She is a top global healthcare influencer, virtual nursing expert, nurse futurist, an innovator, strategic advisor, a global speaker, and a best-selling author.
She also holds the record of the most letters after her name of any immersive medical podcast. Guest. We have Bonnie Clipper, DNP, MA, MBA, RN, CENP, FACHE, and FAAN. I couldn't tell you what any of those mean except maybe MBA, but they seem
Well,
impressive.
she is very impressive, and we're very excited to have her on the show today, especially after one of the books that she published called The Innovation Handbook, and we're going to talk a lot about that. So please turn up your volume and welcome Bonnie Clipper. Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, Bonnie, I want to kind of get right into it. The reason why I reached out for you to join our podcast. So I have a little bit of a story here for you. I was at the OADN conference doing some like immersive technology stuff for nurses. And OADN is the organization for associate degree in nursing. And there was this booth next to us during a lull, a slow moment. There wasn't a lot of attendees. And the woman at the booth had all these books on these tables. And she grabs one of them and she goes, "Oh, hey, you should check out this book." And we were becoming friendly. I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, great, thanks." And she gives it to me and I'm looking at it, and the book was called The Innovation Handbook, a nurse leader's guide to transforming nursing by Bonnie Clipper. And I was like, "Wow, thank you. This is so great." And the woman was like, "That'll be $36."
Yeah,
And
there's
I was
there's
like,
one of the book owners. Yeah.
"All right. That sounds good." And so we paid her, and I read your book and then sent it to our nurse innovator that I work with, Martha, who was going to join us today, but she got sick. So she's bummed. She really wanted to meet you. And so now two of us have been ingesting how to become a nurse innovator and reading the handbook. And so I'd like to start right there with a question for you. Well, actually, let's start with this. If you haven't read the book, let me just read you this little description and then we'll go into a question. So, the book description on Amazon is: the global healthcare ecosystem is in chaos, caught in the convergence of pandemic induced disruption, residual inequities, burnout, and turnover. Nurse leaders can either succumb to the churn or spot and seize a rare opportunity for true transformation. They must thoughtfully consider all aspects of their traditional roles and tackle trigger topics such as staffing, scheduling, value-based care, outcome tracking, and more. Informed, empowered nurses can re-envision roles, integrate technologies, and develop new models to deliver the highest level of patient care. So, Bonnie, first question for you. What does innovation in nursing mean to you?
You know what? I'm going to tell you, I think that's fluid, right? The thing about innovation is we've never been able to pin down one definition, not just in nursing or healthcare, anything. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think innovation can be iterative or it can be transformative. It provides a ton of opportunity, though, for nurses to jump in and own this space so that we innovate not only our own profession, but also as the people that are providing the care to the patients. Why aren't we the ones out there driving some of these new care processes? Why aren't we involved more in the technologies that are being sold to nurses or sold to improve the work life, work flows, workforce. Why aren't nurses more involved in that? So I really think innovation in nursing means it's the opportunity for nurses to step up and problem solve, and for those that are in leadership or other ecosystem related roles to listen to and utilize some of the feedback and recommendations that are coming from the nurses.
So you said it's fluid. Help me understand a little bit more. I want to try to grasp this butterfly that's floating around us, right? Is it maybe it's all of these things, but is innovation like revamping an entire program and saying we're doing this differently? Or is it like starting small and going, here's one KPI and we're going to do something new and different to tackle this one little thing? Or is it more like choosing a new theme or North Star metric for your organization where we go, we're going to start thinking this way. We're not going to pick one thing. We're not going to pick one project. We're going to say, starting today, we have a new filter, a new lens that we look through things.
Yeah, so here's what I'm going to tell you. Innovation should not be process improvement, yet it sometimes can be, right? It can be iterative. So it can be new solutions to existing problems. It can also be using ways that we deliver care, ways that we provide a therapy, a treatment, a medication, a learning, and we issue it or do it in a different way. I think there's really a whole lot of opportunity here for us to kind of interpret and apply the principles differently. At the end of the day, what I believe the goal is that we truly transform the way we practice nursing and transform the way we provide care. In my opinion, while that means you could iterate along the way, I think it's going to have to be more than that. And if you've read the book, I say in there several times, I piss people off equally, whether it's hospitals, health systems, whether it's how we reimburse nursing, whether it's how we staff, whether it's how we teach new nurses. All of it is broken. So I think the opportunity is for nurses literally to think about doing something in a completely different and transformative way.
Hearing you say all of it is broken, it speaks to our North Star metric here. We talk about it all the time. Maybe I piss people off on multiple levels because we always revert back to the World Health Organization is claiming the staffing shortage, 10 million people in 6 years, we're going to be short. And what you're talking about is it's broken. And so now we're up against this really big problem that kind of compounds and stacks. So not only is there a shortage, not only are people aging out, not only do we need to produce more, but we also need to be better. We also need to do better. We need to think different. So how does one approach innovation? I refer to it as like a butterfly because it does kind of seem like this thing that one can decide, I know I want to do this. I know I have to do something. We can't keep doing the same thing because we're getting a poor result. Something has to change. So how do I sit down with this blank piece of paper and go, all right, today I'm going to do something innovative, or I'm going to innovate? How do I start it?
That's a great question. So healthcare traditionally is a very risk-averse industry, particularly as it comes to doing things differently, right? Even though organizations today still say they're incredibly innovative, they're very open-minded, they want to do things differently, we see as we kind of bump up against those guardrails where organizations actually start to get nervous, right? Let's talk about staffing. We've had staffing and resource issues, workload issues for a very, very, very long time. Yet there really isn't a resolution to that. And sometimes I sound like a malcontent on this, but is the reason that we're not able to fix it because we've decided that our finance issues are so strong and such an anchor point that we're not able to cross a certain line? Or is it that we've not challenged ourselves enough to really find the solution? And I am not saying that having a margin in healthcare is not important, because it absolutely is. However, aren't there other things that we could do instead of just continually believing that we could throw more nurses at the problem and get the results that we want? aren't there ways to identify really good, appropriate, usable technologies that can start to offload work and help us make the boots on the ground more effective? That's where I really want to push and challenge people, just to think about, how do we do this differently? That's where innovation comes in.
Right. The solution isn't necessarily quantity, but quality. It's building it up from the ground up to make sure that we're effective at every level.
It's quality, and it means not only humans delivering the care anymore, right? I think we have to find ways
Interesting.
to adopt technology. We have to identify the right technologies, and we're going to have to figure out, how do we create dyad models or hybrid models of care that allow us to do that.
Man, we need to get Dr. GP in here with you. We did an episode with him, and that is right up his alley. We were talking about that very thing. And it's a hurdle. It's a mountain to climb, to think that it's not just a person who's going to help you get better. And it's an even, maybe even a bigger hill to climb, to think that I'm going to work with not just a person, but also this technology, this innovation. And I'm not just talking a robot. I'm talking, a better hammer to build the house, which is like a real big departure from the same way that things have been done for 50 years. Do you have a favorite technology that seems to be doing well or having more wins than losses? I don't think anything's a silver bullet, but is there a technology you like?
Well, so I'll tell you, in my world, we're extremely focused on virtual nursing, particularly for acute care hospitals, right? So providing inpatient virtual nurses to support the direct care nurses. So that's the space that I spend most of my time in. I think there are some amazing platforms that have begun to emerge. And I sort of joke about this, but because I'm not the person writing the check, I believe that the technology that is more advanced, more robust, more sensor related, more AI related is the smarter play. It's the better place to invest your time and money, because it's at least future facing technology. Some of the other technology, while it's extremely good and it's absolutely solves a problem, it feels as though if you invest heavily in that, you might already be out of date in about a year. So I
Yeah.
think if I was the person writing the check, I'd rather write the bigger check knowing that I got a couple of years of play out of that stuff versus maybe outdating next year. It's
Yeah,
kind of like what we all do, Devin, on our iPhones or your
yeah.
whatever, right? You look online, and if you see a new release coming out, you're going to just wait for that one instead of buy what's out today, because you know it's going to be out of date in 12 or 18 months.
Yeah, I skipped the iPhone 14 for that very reason. I had the 13, it was working, and I'm like, I want the next one I buy to last more than 2 years, and I skipped 14. I do want to circle back on one thing. You said, oh, just give me 1 second to cover. we have to define it for the audience. Sensor. I just want to circle back on one thing. You said sensor, and I just wanted to make sure, are you talking about, you said sensory. Are you talking about security and censoring, or are you talking about like haptics or some other senses?
I'm talking about sensor, ambient computer vision, ambient computer sound sensors that are
I
mounted
see.
in the patient room. They actually can listen, they can observe, not like creepy Big Brother, but based on the rules the organization defines. That way they can actually get a sense of what's going on with a particular patient. And if you create this system that has artificial intelligence to augment it, for example, if you are going to provide a telesitter or an e-sitter program, you can do it with a human being just like we are, monitoring a patient through a tablet, through a mobile cart, through a camera mounted in a room. You absolutely can have a human being monitor a X number of patients to see whether or not that patient looks like they're going to try to get up or might represent someone that's going to fall. And then you trigger an interaction or a notification to a caregiver on the unit to go in and stop that fall from happening. In the world of AI, the AI can actually learn and recognize patients that look like they're getting up and might be kind of breaking the plane of the bed, and therefore are going to be a harm to themselves because they might fall. So
Right.
that trained algorithm now notifies me instead of the human being. So it allows you to scale across a whole lot more patients. Doesn't mean that you only have to adopt that system, but imagine how powerful that would be if it supplemented the humans in that kind of a world.
Yeah, and what a low touch technology. So you get a notification. A lot of people say, what if AI is wrong? What if AI hallucinates? But in that little situation you just described, worst case scenario, you check on a patient that didn't need to be checked on because it notified you that maybe they broke the plane and they didn't. That seems like a really low hanging fruit solution of technology or innovation.
Absolutely. I mean, based on what I'm seeing and the people that are reaching out to us to develop virtual nursing programs for their inpatient care units, I absolutely believe that this is going to become the standard of care in less than 5 years. I mean, we know right now that 66% of acute care hospitals are actually evaluating virtual nursing. Either is this going to be helpful to us, evaluating technology, beginning to assemble their own care delivery model. So I can't see a future that virtual nursing for inpatients isn't part of that.
Yeah.
Hey, Devin, I keep hearing about competency-based education from nurses online. What is that? Can you break that down for me?
Oh, yeah, sure thing. Do you know anything about cooking?
Yeah, I'm actually sous videing a couple steaks for tonight right now.
Oh, okay. Well, then, so in cooking, chefs follow recipes but often adjust ingredients and cooking times based on taste and experience. So in competency based education, it's similar. It's about understanding the core objectives or the recipe and adjusting teaching methods, ingredients, and times based on student progress and feedback.
Got it. So like being able to tailor a VR sim to the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And VR Patience serves as your kitchen, equipped with all the tools you need to cook up the perfect learning experience.
Okay, so if I really wanted to tackle CBE in my nursing school, I should go to vrpatients.com and book a demo.
That's right. Visit vrpatience.com and start your sous videing today. I can't believe you know what sous videing is. I have no idea what that is. We got to talk about that another day.
Sure, yeah. Dr. Clipper, Bonnie, which do you prefer?
Bonnie.
Bonnie, you got it. Do you have any examples of an innovative solution that enhances the learning experience for nursing students or educators compared to any traditional methods?
That's a great question, Connor. And I think that we continue to learn a whole lot from our younger generations, particularly Zers. I have two of these myself. I know what a handful they can be. Uh, they not only challenged the status quo, but it was kind of like they were all born angry. So I think that there's a real opportunity for us to figure out how to use technology that engages them in the learning process. So when I talk to deans and I talk to schools of nursing, I oftentimes will ask them, what are you doing that's different besides changing up your curricula? What technologies are you adopting? And one of my favorite approaches is honestly incorporating virtual or augmented reality into the student experience, simply because as far as let's be honest, as far as Gen Z, they were playing games on their phone before they were really doing anything else purposeful with it.
Right.
So engaging them in gaming, getting their brain to light up in that way is something they've been wired from what age 3 to be able to do. So I think if we don't engage them in learning that way, I think we're going to lose a lot of content that just kind of falls out their ear because it's really just not hardwired good enough.
So do you see that as reinforcement learning or replacement learning? Do it in
Um,
VR instead or do it in VR in addition?
I think it's both. I think it depends on the content and the context. So I think that when you're talking about students in nursing school, I think it's a lot of, it's going to be good reinforcement of content, right? When we begin to deploy that technology more and more in hospitals, I think we'll be seeing it as replacement to the typical onboarding and orientation or competency assessment, and rather come down and check out your Oculus because we've preloaded all of the
Right.
competencies in your headset. So as a med surg nurse, you need to check this out and do all the competencies. We can measure everything and drop it off when you're done.
And what a great way to address sentinel events or other remedial education in the professional environment. And for that education to be tailored to the local needs. The population might be a different shape, age, color. You might have a specific disease going on in your area that you need to make sure that your nurses know how to handle or need to retrain on because they already have their license, right? They made it through school. They have achieved some form of competency. They are now professionals. So I could really see that working where it's like we're going to have them just do this part in VR because they need to do it quickly and get back on the floor and they need to do it well.
Exactly. And, you guys know this better than I, but clearly the opportunity here is that we can develop the muscle memory as well as the cognition, the critical thinking, the problem solving all at the same time. And the beauty of it is that you can track it so much better to understand learning outcomes, where there were hesitations, where there were problems. Then you know if you need to remediate exactly what you need to go back and fix.
I love that topic because I used to teach, and when I was a adjunct faculty at a community college teaching these paramedic students, we would, if we ever got audited on, you gave such and such student a license on this date, show me the skills that they performed, and you go to a file cabinet, you open it up, and you have to like sift through 100 names till you get to M. You pull it out, and there's a piece of paper that someone signed who doesn't work here anymore, and that's supposed to be proof. And it's different today if you can do it digitally, right? Because then you can just log into the platform and search for the person's name and see everything they did, like digitally stamped. Sometimes even see the recording or see a playback or actually even perform yourself. Like that scenario still exists. And so you can go, and that's the scenario that they did, or that's the skill that they performed. And you want to try it, Mr. Auditor? And that's a whole new power.
Oh, it's absolutely different. So you are sort of bringing up one of my favorite wink wink topics, and that is as a chief nursing officer, we had to make sure that competencies were always up to date. So every once in a while, you would randomly audit and have them pull X number of files, take a look at them yourself, right? And when you would do that, you would see a list of competencies, and under them, you'd see like multiple steps, this one, then that one, then that one. And a lot of times, what did you see? A line through all of them with initials. I don't know what that means, except that somebody at least had a pen and signed some initials, right?
And
We
was
had
very
to make
busy.
assumptions
Yeah.
around that. But yes, there is so much more today that allows us to actually track and document and understand what people actually learn because they can tell us or they can demonstrate it.
Could you speak to something that has to do with maybe a little bit of fear around this type of tracking? And I'll give you a little bit of context. I spoke to I was at a hospital, and this hospital system, we were discussing this type of technology and how powerful it is to be able to look at the post analytics, oftentimes referred to as even a grading or some way to see what someone had been doing step by step. And their response was, well, we wouldn't want to measure that because we don't want these professionals to fail in these digital sims, right? Like we don't want that stamped. And I kind of understand what they're talking about. So, this wasn't necessarily their situation, but I would extrapolate and say, so if I'm a hospital and I have a sentinel event, and then I bring in a collection of healthcare providers that were part of that sentinel event, and so we're going to do some training on that scenario, and so we do some training on it. And the purpose of the remedial training is to just go through it a couple of times and debrief and discuss and then get back on the floor. It's not to achieve like an 83% on the grading of a game. And so I sensed a little bit of fear that suddenly this like big brother digital system was going to be like catching them and they're getting tested again, even though they're licensed now. And are you kind of catching on to what I'm reaching for? Have you ever sensed that or heard the fear that maybe there might be too much analytics? Or was that just one person's concern?
I would say a couple of things. Having the ability to measure knowledge, competence, performance, I think there is a lot of power in that for the individual, as well as a lot of assurance for the organization who is providing care to patients. So, a couple of things come to mind for me. In the VR systems that I'm familiar with, the organizations absolutely have the ability to go in and test those with a cohort of employees, nurses, therapists, physicians, whomever, to get a sense of, is the VR asset on point or is it not? Are the questions the right questions? What is kind of the pass rate if we were to deploy this and test it? So the organizations have the ability to do that, to make sure that it is asking the right questions, that the scenarios make sense, that everything in the rooms or in the scenario is recognizable. So organizations have all that control themselves. I think at the end of the day, it is a completely different way to hold individuals accountable for their own practice. That part of it is probably, I don't want to use the word new, but it's different, because even though we're all license holders and we have been told that for, the 10, 20, 30 years of our careers, I think it is very different doing those kind of things in a VR scenario and having it measure different steps along the way than we're accustomed to.
Yeah, it's definitely very granular. And it's also very transparent, because at any date, I can look up the granular stuff that we did or did not do. And so maybe that accountability is good in our healthcare system. I think probably the best thing about it is that if it's twice or even 3 times the analytics and granular measurements, and half the time, because it's more effective, it's portable, it's less setup, it requires one person, you could do it anywhere, anytime. Well, that's a good thing. Because if we wanted to triple our analytics with typical simulation, there are people involved in setting things up, and there are people to pay and to employ to manage mechanical devices, and you've maybe 1 to 2 people on each device in order to actually be able to learn from it. And it's a whole setup. It's an extravaganza. That suddenly can become more fluid.
Yeah, I would also flip that a little bit and say, if the organization really wants to ensure that the individuals that it employs are the highest caliber clinicians around, then time also has to be dedicated to training so that those outcomes can be achieved, right? I don't think it's a matter of using the carrot or the stick. I think it's the carrot, meaning time to educate, grow, and develop skill sets that are in demand and technical in nature in order for people to successfully perform.
I think it was chapter 3, the current state of nursing, from your book. Can you describe for us the current state of nursing, if that includes it being broken? That might be helpful for people out there who aren't in the healthcare profession but find themselves to be patients occasionally.
Yeah, I think that we've seen an awful lot of turnover in nursing. Probably the most concerning aspect of this, in my opinion, is new grads. So we produce a fair amount of nursing students that convert to new nurses. We actually we saw a dip after the pandemic, and now we're seeing more again. So very favorable. That's awesome. Our challenge is that by the end of year 2, 60+% of these new nurses are leaving. So when you think about it, it's incredibly expensive to go to nursing school. And we're seeing turnover rates of 60+% at the 2-year mark. So that's a nut that we have to crack. And when I say everything is broken, I think we have to figure out how to make nursing attractive in ways that we retain people, whether it's through scheduling, whether it's through providing them with ample opportunities to move around throughout their career, teaching them new skills. We're going to have to figure out what that looks like. And what we learned is kind of what many of us knew as gut intuition, and that throwing a monthly pizza party or bringing in donuts isn't what nurses want to feel appreciated and valued.
No
And
kidding.
while we all knew that, it felt like an easy go-to instead
Yeah.
of perhaps addressing some of these more complex, deeply rooted issues.
Okay. So what would you tell leadership at a hospital or, well, I was going to say educational institution, but I think they're quite different. One seems to be preparing the nurses. Here's what you can expect when you get in the real world. And the other one's like, welcome to the real world. Here's your pizza. What would you tell the CNO at the
Well,
hospital?
so you talk about kind of a divergence there, two different worlds. I think the issue that we see in academia is that the salary is so much less. You're talking about pulling a really good nurse out of a practice environment and asking them to educate young people, maybe not even young people, right? New nurses. And that's an awful lot of responsibility. And then to pay them less than they're making, it's not attractive to people. So we continue to see a lot of positions go unfilled in academia. Now, when you flip that and you're talking about how can we improve retention on the part of the organization, I would say every single organization is different. So there are some that do this amazingly well. It means that you're going to have to spend money and do salary adjustments on a probably 12 to 18 month cycle. Maybe you get away with 2 years. Also figuring out how
Hmm.
can you create something that looks like a career lattice. So for everything they do and every additional contribution, maybe there's compensation for that. Now, I would tell you, you're going to find people, we argue amongst ourselves in nursing about this, because shouldn't a professional nurse precept and mentor and not expect to be compensated? Well, they should precept and mentor. However, it is additional responsibility. It does make their day more complicated. In some cases, it's just plain downright burdensome to have students tagging along and trying to teach them while you want to zip around and give care. So I think we have to balance what it is we're asking of people with how we're recognizing the value of that contribution.
Well, I don't know if you know Susie Cardon-Egeren or Lisa Marie Wands. We did a whole episode on this, and a good nurse does not necessarily make a good teacher either. So to
Right.
not compensate someone for their contribution, I think presumes that you're also not now as responsible for the workload required to help a student get over the knowledge hill. Yeah.
Bonnie, just for clarification, you said that I think you said 60% of the nurse force leaves after 2 years. When you say leaves, do you mean leaves that hospital or leaves the profession altogether?
In most cases, we see them actually leave nursing. Now, what we don't know is there a point in which they come back in?
Right.
In particularly, again, when you look at some of the data around Gen Zers, what I love about this group of people is that they are far more courageous and gutsy than many of us would have been earlier in our careers. So instead, oftentimes this group is kind of thinking, if my contribution and my impact isn't valued, maybe this isn't the place for me. And I think that takes a lot of courage to get to that point, right? So many of us just kind of accepted it as this is the best we get. So you just got to keep chugging along every day. When we see numbers around nurses leaving, generally they're getting out of direct patient care practice and doing something else. Maybe, I guess it could be academia. A lot of times it is things like getting into startup world, becoming a salesperson for medical product, healthcare devices, things of that nature. So I think once you have a nursing education and nursing experience, we're kind of educated and created unlike any other profession in terms of how we think and problem solve. So having nurses that are, I don't know, engineers, architects, coders, developers, I think is a brilliant move as well.
For the audience, what's our age group for Gen Z? I'm seeing some conflicting information online right now. Do you have a little authoritative stamp for us here? I mean, they're clearly in their 20s, but there's kind of a range there.
Yeah, there is a range. I don't have any sense of guidance for you. I see different cohorts that are specified quite often. I know that I have raised two that seem to fit right smack dab into the general persona that we often hear described.
Yeah. So I'm looking here. If we just go off of Pew research, Gen Z is age 7 to 22 as of 2019. So that's,
I think the
couple
general
years ago.
consensus is that it's after, if you're born after the year 2000. I know it gets a little
Okay.
gray. I'm born
Pretty
in
close to
95. I'm
2000.
technically a zillennial, I think they've called it, where it's right in the transition there. But I think it's generally after the year 2000.
Thank you.
So there you go.
Well, I was going to ask you, so what is one to do? But the answer is innovate. The answer is take a leap. It's take a risk. It's make a change. It's go for it. I asked you earlier, what would you tell the CNO? Is that what you would tell them? You got to jump into something?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there isn't a choice not to do that. And I just pulled some data, so I want to correct myself. 57% of new nurses leave by the end of their second year. 57%.
It's still more
So
than half. It's still too many.
It's huge. It's huge. So when you think about what does that mean, I think that we oftentimes, which is what prompted me to write the book, quite honestly, we're stuck in the definition of insanity, just continuing to do what we know how to do and expecting someday it's going to provide different results, which of course it's not. So I think we have no choice but to do things differently. Whether that means identifying and deploying technologies that are going to assist us in this work, creating new roles, reevaluating the care team. I think it's sort of like check, check, and check. I think we have to do all of the above.
Okay, so I'm a CNO. I'm going to do something. I'm going to take a step out there, and I'm going to make a change at my hospital. What are some common obstacles that you foresee I could bump into trying to implement some new innovative strategies that might be outlined in your book? Can you prepare me for the bumpy road I'm about to embark on?
Sure. So oftentimes what happens is that we run into this culture that says, this is how we do it here. And that can continually be perpetuated by people that have been in the organization for a while. Eventually, every one of us becomes that person, right? If you're around long enough, you've been in the organization a while and you kind of go, that won't work here. So that's a pretty heavy downer when you're looking at how do we change and do things differently. So I think we have to find ways to identify that early on, prepare people to know it's coming, and then give them tactics and solutions of how to navigate through that. Change management is one of the things that I think we don't do as well as we could and as we should when we come up with new approaches or innovative ways to do things.
Go ahead, Connor.
So in your book, you mentioned leadership in crisis. What are some key qualities that nurse leaders must possess or develop to effectively guide their teams through crises?
You have to be able to listen and willing to hear the good and the bad. There's an awful lot that comes from a human-centered approach of listening to not only those that are doing the work, but also to patients. And in a lean methodology world, we would say go to Gemba, right? Go to where the work is being done, ask questions and learn and observe. So I think that that's probably something that can't be overstated, because oftentimes the people doing the work understand the real problem and also have some solutions that may be helpful as well.
Bonnie, this has been awesome. I just looked at the clock and realized that we just blew through 40 minutes. So thank you so much. We want to make sure that we're respectful of your time. So I think we're going to wrap up just with a couple more questions, and we'll do our lightning round, and we'll be all done for the day. Going back to this qualities, are they the same and similar qualities for someone who is going to tackle a big innovation? Is it be patient, be a listener, or are there different qualities for people who are going to step into an innovation role?
I think there's a lot of crossover there, right? I mean, I think you're going to find people that are really, what I would say, good innovators, are very curious and don't accept the status quo and are just continually looking at chipping away and doing things differently. Yes, that person too can be a very good leader, but I think being an innovator is a little bit different, and everyone is not comfortable in that role. I mean, you really think about not being satisfied with what's in front of you, and you just keep pushing and asking questions over and over. And even when you get a final product, iterating through that, is this the best we can do? Is there something more? Did we leave crumbs behind? Is there more to it? You know, I think that that's really getting someone that is just not willing to be satisfied and trying to unpeel the onion, whatever metaphor you want to use. I think it's really about how do we continue to do better and better and better.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a little bit of a prep. Let's switch over to our lightning round. These are really easy. These are going to be like, what's your favorite color? But at the end of it, we're going to ask you if you have any advice for a new budding nurse. So hold on to that one, and we'll get the lightning round going. Go ahead, Connor.
We'll get it started. Devin kind of blew it a little bit. What's your favorite color?
Red.
What's your favorite way to unwind after work?
Ooh, that's a two-parter. It would be a dog walk and an IPA.
Ooh.
A fantastic combination.
Fantastic combination. We should hang out.
Yeah.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, that's a toughie. I would love to read people's minds.
Wait, by choice or just always hear them? Because one seems like not a superpower privilege.
By choice, when I want to know, I want to be able to hear what they're thinking or read their mind, but not all the time. That would make you crazy.
Yes, it would.
So if you were given the opportunity to travel to a new time zone, a new time, when would you go?
A new time zone or a new
I said
time?
zone. Let me try that question again. Where would you travel to given the opportunity in time? Would you go back to the Stone Age? Would you go to the Ice Age? Would you go to 1984?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I feel like we, especially in the work I do in virtual nursing, I feel like we're the Flintstones trying to be the Jetsons. So I want to go to the Jetsons time zone, time age, whenever that is.
It's 2040.
Canonically, it happens 30 or 20 years
It's
from
coming
now.
up quick.
Yeah.
Are you a coffee or a tea drinker?
Coffee.
Almost every healthcare professional that we ask is a coffee drinker.
Yep.
It's exactly where I learned to drink it. It was, oftentimes our turn to bring in that nasty big old 2-pound can of whatever coffee. So you learn to drink it.
Yep. If you could have dinner with a historical figure, who would you have dinner with?
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, that was quick. Awesome.
She had that on lock.
Yeah, she'd be a great one to learn from.
Last one, and then we'll get to our closing question. What is your favorite sports team?
I would have to say, Connor, it's a toss-up for me between the Chicago Bears or the Chicago Cubs. And they're both, I'd be leaning towards, just to spare you today, I'd be leaning towards the Cubs.
For those listening, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, that I am a lifelong Packers fan, and Bonnie is not.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to introduce you to Paul. He's out in Ann Arbor, Michigan, on Life Flight, and he's a fan. All right, closing question: what would you say to an educator or a CNO or even a nursing student, you pick, looking to get into this world, looking to make an innovative change? Do you have any advice for someone about to take this step?
Absolutely. Read all you can that is not nursing or healthcare related about technology, artificial intelligence, the future, where we're going. Don't continue just to immerse yourself in healthcare, but rather raise your vantage point and figure out what's out there.
That's got to be some of the best advice we've ever gotten on the pod. Rarely do people recommend things outside of their industry. I just think that was key. That was a great piece of advice. Thank you for that.
And
Yeah,
then
one of my
somewhere in
favorite reads is Fast Company, and I love it because it is not healthcare specific.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in that reading list is the Innovation Handbook, A Nurse Leader's Guide to Transforming Nursing by Dr. Bonnie Clipper.
Yes, it is,
Well,
Connor.
Bonnie, thank you so much for today. Gosh, I feel like we could talk for quite a while. So maybe one day we'll invite you back on after an innovation has occurred and see if we have more to talk about. But until that day, thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Hey, Connor, have you caught wind of the latest whispers about VR patients?
Whispers? No. What's going on?
Well, apparently they're building a new feature that's tailored specifically for nursing schools, focusing on competency-based education and looking to integrate more VR into their training.
Okay, that sounds pretty massive. Why all the secrecy, though?
Well, I guess they're keeping it under tight wraps for now, but apparently it's a big deal.
Wow. Wait, why is it a big deal?
Well, so all of these VR sim companies are building downloadable games as simulations that aren't really intended to tackle competency-based education. So it's like the first one.
Okay, so other companies are trying to gamify patient care, but this doesn't sound like a game at all. How do we find out more?
Well, apparently the only real way to get the full picture is to visit vrpatients.com and book a private demo. They're planning to unveil it to those who are genuinely interested, one-on-one.
All right, you had me at whispers. So I just go to vrpatients.com and book a demo?
Yep. Go to vrpatients.com and book your demo.